Some betrayals don't echo, they detonate. The church bells were still ringing when my mother leaned toward me, her perfume sharp enough to sting my eyes. My daughter, Leora, stood in front of the altar in her white dress, a dress I'd sewn myself because Maura Alex said, "Don't expect me to pay for your mistakes." The room was filled with families taking photos, whispering blessings. And then, casually, like she was commenting on the flowers, "You were never meant to keep her, Katie. I sold her life before you were even pregnant." For a second, I wondered if I misheard. But Maura's smile didn't match her words. It was polite, elegant, socially perfect. The kind she wore when she wanted to remind me she owned every room she entered and every life she touched. I didn't scream. I didn't collapse. My hands only tightened around Leora's shoulders as a strange calm slid through me. The same quiet stillness I felt the night Myrk Valen showed up at my door trembling, saying he had something I needed to see. Moira didn't know that. She thought she still owned the narrative. She leaned back in the pew, adjusted her pearl bracelet, and whispered, "Don't make a scene, darling. You never had a choice." But I had already learned something 2 nights before, something she didn't know I knew. And that secret, tucked away like a burning coal inside my chest, kept me steady while the world tilted under my feet. I whispered back, my voice soft but unshakable, "Neither did you." Her smile faltered. For the first time in my life, she looked unsure. And the story truly began. My name is Katie Varga, and I was 28 the day I realized my entire life had been arranged like furniture in my mother's house, decorative, obedient, and easy to move. People often assume women like me should have seen the signs, but you don't see red flags when they're the same color as your childhood walls. Growing up, Maura Alex didn't raise me. She managed me. She used to tell people I was mature for my age, but what she meant was that I had already learned how to absorb blame, raise my younger cousins, clean up her emotional disasters, and disappear whenever Isolde needed the spotlight. Isolde, her miracle child, the one Maura bragged about at every dinner table. Me, I was the spare, the insurance policy, the one who needed nothing so Maura could give everything to her favorite. I learned early, if Isolde cried, I comforted her. If Maura failed, I apologized. If someone needed to be sacrificed, it was always me. On my 13th birthday, Maura forgot to show up. She was busy attending Isolde's violin recital. She patted my head later and said, almost annoyed, "Well, darling, birthdays are for children. You've always been more useful than that." Useful, that was my place. A daughter only in title and property in practice. Even now, telling this story, I want anyone who's lived a life like mine to hear this clearly. Being used is not the same as being loved. And the moment you accept that truth, you stop bleeding for people who sharpen their knives on your kindness. I didn't know I would one day face the ultimate betrayal, that Moira had sold the rights to my future child before I ever carried her. But when I look back, every cruel moment was a breadcrumb leading to that truth. And the first person to show me the hidden path was Myrk, but that part comes soon. For now, all you need to understand is this. By the time Maura whispered that monstrous sentence in the church, I had already begun to wake up, and she didn't know it. Not yet. My apartment was small but mine. I paid for it by sewing dresses for wealthy women who never remembered my name. Leora's toys were scattered across the floor, her laughter the only sound that made the walls feel like home. Maura called my life tragic and limited, but it was the first place I'd ever lived where I could lock the door and know I was safe. Until Myrk knocked. Until everything I thought I knew shattered like glass under a hammer. The rain that night felt prophetic, like the sky knew something terrible was coming and wanted to warn me. But warnings only matter if you understand the language. And I didn't. Not yet. Maura had trained me so well to ignore my instincts, to doubt my feelings, to prioritize her comfort over my safety. It took years to unlearn that conditioning. And even now, sometimes I catch myself apologizing for things that aren't my fault. But that night when Myrk knocked, something shifted. Something ancient and protective woke up inside me. Mother instinct, maybe, or just the part of me that had been silent too long. It was 2 nights before the confirmation ceremony. Rain hammered the windows of my small flat, the kind of rain that makes the world feel heavier than it is. Leora was asleep on the couch, her tiny fist curled near her cheek. I was sewing the last bead onto her dress when someone knocked, 3 soft taps, one louder. I knew that knock. I had heard it at my mother's house for years. When I opened the door, Myrk Valen stood there, pale, drenched, trembling like someone fighting his own skeleton just to stay upright. Myrk had always been Moira's shadow, her bookkeeper, her confidant, her handler even. I grew up watching him pour her wine, drive her to appointments, whisper reminders into her ear like he was rewinding her world for her convenience. But that night, he looked nothing like the composed man I remembered. "Katie," he whispered, voice cracking. "Please, can I come in? I don't have anyone else." Those words alone should have warned me. Myrk was not a man who asked for anything. I stepped aside, and he stumbled in. His coat dripped onto the floor, his breath shaky. Leora shifted on the couch, and he stared at her with something between guilt and fear. "Myrk, what happened?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his soaked coat and pulled out a thick folder sealed with twine. He placed it on my kitchen table like it weighed 1,000 years. "You need to see this," he whispered, "before she destroys you completely." My stomach tightened. "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. He swallowed hard. "Your mother." The folder's presence felt like a heartbeat in the room. I stared at him, searching his face. "Myrk, what have you done?" His eyes filled with tears, real ones, not performative or dramatic, the kind you don't expect from a controlled man like him. "I stayed loyal to her for too long," he said. "But tonight she tried to ruin me, truly ruin me, and I realized something." He looked at me with a kind of broken devotion. "You're the only one she fears, because you're the only one she can't control forever." I didn't understand then, not fully, but I opened the folder. The first page made my knees go weak. Names, dates, signatures, transactions. A contract involving my name, and a child signed years before I ever became a mother. My throat closed. "Myrk, what is this?" His voice cracked as he answered. "Your mother sold the rights to your future child, and I'm done helping her hide it." Something inside me, something soft, broke and hardened in the same breath. And that night, without knowing it, the quiet beginning of my revenge began. I sat at my kitchen table with Myrk trembling across from me. The rain outside had softened, but my heartbeat hadn't. The first page of the folder showed a contract titled, "Future Guardianship Rights Conditional Purchase Agreement." I felt sick. There was my signature, but it wasn't mine. "Myrk, this is forged." He nodded, eyes red. "Your mother practiced your handwriting for months." Inside the folder were bank transfers to Moira's hidden accounts, correspondence with a wealthy couple, a payment marked "Final Installment," child secured, and an agreement naming Moira as intermediary between me and the buyers. Each page felt like a blade cutting deeper into my understanding of who my mother really was. I whispered, "Why would she do this?" Myrk swallowed hard. "Debt, Katie, so much debt from Vienna, from Isolde's lifestyle, she needed a way out. And she used me." He whispered, "She always did." That night, a part of me that still wanted to believe Moira loved me died quietly. I had spent my entire life making excuses for her, telling myself she was stressed, overwhelmed, doing her best. But this wasn't stress. This was calculation. This was cold, deliberate betrayal. I looked at Leora sleeping on the couch, her chest rising and falling peacefully. She had no idea that before she was even born, her grandmother had sold her like merchandise. The thought made me physically ill. Myrk stayed with me that night, not speaking, just present. He made tea that neither of us drank. He checked the locks on my doors. He looked out the window every few minutes, as if expecting Moira to appear like a demon summoned by guilt. "She'll know you have these," I said finally. "She'll come for them." "Let her," Myrk said, his voice harder than I'd ever heard it. "I'm done being afraid of her." Myrk spoke like a man finally confessing sins. He told me everything. the boutique Moira flaunted as her success was failing. She borrowed from an underground lender who didn't forgive. She funded Isolde's privileged life with money she didn't have. And when the lender threatened her home, reputation, and comfort, she traded me for air. She said you were replaceable, Myrick whispered. Replaceable? I stared at the wall so I wouldn't cry in front of him. People who grow up with narcissistic parents know this truth. Your pain is always negotiable. Their comfort never is. The lender was based in Vienna, Myrick explained. A man named Kaspar Brenner who operated in the shadows of legitimate business. He loaned money to people who couldn't get bank loans, and he collected with interest rates that bordered on criminal. Moira had borrowed heavily to maintain her image, to fund Isolde's endless needs, to keep up appearances in social circles that mattered to her. When the debt grew too large, Kaspar gave her an ultimatum: pay in full or lose everything. Her house, her business, her reputation, everything she had built would crumble. That's when Moira came up with her plan. She knew I wanted children someday. She knew wealthy couples paid enormous sums for private adoptions. And she knew I was naive enough, obedient enough, controlled enough that I might never question what happened. She told Kaspar she had a valuable asset, Myrick said. A daughter who would produce a child that could be sold to the highest bidder. He agreed to delay the debt if she could deliver. I felt bile rise in my throat. How much did she get? Myrick's voice was barely audible. Enough to pay off half the debt and fund Isolde's life for 2 years. Isolde, my sister, had been Moira's crown jewel since birth. Moira used to say, "You were born strong, Katie. Isolde was born delicate. She needs more." More time, more money, more affection, more everything. Meanwhile, I was expected to raise her, protect her, clean up her disasters, and disappear when Moira needed a daughter to show off. Myrick watched me close the folder and whispered, "You were never the daughter she chose, just the daughter she used." For the first time in years, I believed him. Isolde lived in a beautiful apartment in Lyon, funded entirely by Moira. She took violin lessons, painting classes, culinary courses. She traveled to Paris for healing retreats and posted photos of herself looking ethereal and free. Meanwhile, I sewed dresses in a cramped apartment, struggling to afford Leora's shoes. I never resented Isolde. I pitied her. She was trapped in a different cage, one lined with silk and lies. Moira had convinced her she was special, fragile, deserving of endless support. But what Isolde didn't know was that her entire life was funded by my exploitation. "Does Isolde know?" I asked Myrick. He shook his head. "No, Moira kept her in the dark. She told her the money came from investments." "Investments in me," I said bitterly. Myrick nodded. Myrick revealed what I never saw. The money Moira received for selling my unborn child didn't go to debts alone. It paid for Isolde's violin in Prague, her apartment in Lyon, her cosmetic surgeries, her private chef course, her trips to Paris for healing breaks. My daughter's future had funded my sister's perfection. And I, unknowingly, had been raising my child under the shadow of a contract that claimed she was never meant to be mine. "I won't let this continue," I whispered, and I meant it. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer. Not someone Moira knew, not someone connected to our family. I found Aldona Crane through a women's advocacy group. She specialized in cases of exploitation, fraud, and family abuse. When I called her office, I was shaking so hard I could barely speak. "I need help," I said. "My mother sold my daughter before she was born." There was a pause, then Aldona's calm, steady voice. "Come see me today. Bring everything you have." I packed the folder, wrapped it in plastic to protect it from the rain, and took Leora to a neighbor I trusted. I told her I had an important appointment. She asked no questions, just smiled and handed Leora a cookie. Aldona's office was small but organized. She had certificates on the wall, photos of her children, a bookshelf filled with legal texts. She looked at me with eyes that had seen too much suffering but hadn't lost their compassion. I placed the folder on her desk. "This is everything." She opened it slowly, methodically. Her expression didn't change, but I saw her jaw tighten. She read every page, made notes, took photos with her phone. Finally, she looked up. Katie, this isn't just unethical, it's criminal. Fraud, document forgery, illegal contractual purchase of a minor, undeclared income, money laundering through the boutique. Moira's empire wasn't a house of cards, it was a house of crime. Aldona leaned back. We can win this, but you must be quiet, and she must not suspect. Quiet, I could do quietly. I'd been trained my whole life for that. Aldona explained the strategy. We would gather more evidence, document every interaction, record every threat. We would build a case so airtight that Moira couldn't talk her way out. But most importantly, we would wait. Wait for her to make a mistake. Wait for her arrogance to betray her. People like your mother, Aldona said. They always believe they're smarter than everyone else. That arrogance will be her downfall. I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the naive hope of a child waiting for her mother to love her, but the fierce, determined hope of a woman who knows she's fighting for something worth protecting. For weeks, I played the role Moira expected. I visited her house. I let her criticize my hair, my clothes, my parenting. I smiled when she made cutting remarks. I nodded when she lectured me about gratitude. And all the while, Myerk was recording every conversation, every threat, every casual mention of the arrangement she thought I knew nothing about. For weeks, I pretended nothing had changed. I visited my mother. I let her criticize my hair, my clothes, my parenting. I let her talk and talk while Myerk recorded everything, every threat, every slip, every arrogant comment about protecting the family image. Meanwhile, Aldona built the case piece by piece. Every day, I told myself, silent does not mean powerless. Moira began to suspect something. Maybe it was my steadiness. Maybe it was Myerk's fear. Maybe she smelled independence like a predator smells blood. She cornered me in her kitchen one evening after I brought Leora for what Moira called quality grandmother time. The house smelled like expensive candles and old perfume. Isolde was in the next room playing piano, oblivious. I've decided, Moira said, pouring herself wine. Leora will come stay with me for a month. I'll fix her upbringing. My chest tightened. And if I refuse? Her smile sharpened. I'll make a few calls to the couple. They've waited long enough. I felt everything inside me ignite, but I stayed calm, because she had no idea the ground under her feet was already cracking. I'll think about it, I said, my voice neutral. She looked surprised. She expected a fight. She expected tears. Instead, I gave her nothing. That night, I called Aldona. She just threatened me directly. I have witnesses. Aldona's voice was sharp with satisfaction. Perfect. Now we wait for her next move. Aldona called me days later. We're ready, she said. We have enough to freeze her accounts and open a criminal investigation, but we need her to make one more mistake. One more, and Moira in her arrogance gave us exactly that. Isolde came to my flat crying one evening. Her makeup was smeared, her hands shaking. I can't do this anymore, she sobbed. Mama is losing control. She keeps saying you're ungrateful. She's drinking too much. She's threatening Myerk. She says she'll take Leora. At the mention of my daughter, something sharp twisted inside me. I held Isolde's hand. You're safe with me, I told her. She flinched because no one had ever said that to her before. She gave me one detail Aldona needed, a recording on her phone of Moira bragging to a friend about selling Katie's child before she even had one. My sister didn't know she was giving me ammunition. She just wanted love, and I wanted justice. Isolde handed me her phone with trembling fingers. I recorded it because I didn't understand what she meant. I thought maybe I misheard. But she hadn't. The recording was clear. Moira's voice, slightly slurred from wine, laughing with her friend Celeste about the arrangement that had saved the family. Katie never even knew, Moira said on the recording. She's too simple to figure it out. By the time she does, it'll be too late. Celeste's voice, and the couple, they're still waiting. Moira, they'll get their child. I always deliver. The night before Leora's confirmation, I could barely sleep. Myerk stayed up with me in my small kitchen, both of us drinking tea that had gone cold hours ago. "You're doing the right thing," he kept repeating, but his voice shook with uncertainty. But I was thinking about what came next, whether Moira would explode or break or pretend nothing mattered, whether she would cry or rage or play the victim. I had seen all her performances before. I knew her repertoire of manipulation. But nothing prepared me for the sentence she whispered in church the next day, and nothing prepared her for what happened after. The confirmation was beautiful. Leora stood at the altar in her white dress, her face glowing with innocence. The priest blessed her. Families clapped. And Moira sat beside me, smiling like a proud grandmother playing her role perfectly. That's when she leaned in. That's when she whispered the words that would destroy her. "You were never meant to keep her, Katie. I sold her life before you were even pregnant." The shock of hearing it out loud in a church, surrounded by people who thought we were a normal family, it was almost surreal. But I had prepared for this moment. Aldona had told me, "When she confesses, don't react, just remember everything." So I whispered back, my voice soft but unshakable, "Neither did you." And Moira's smile faltered. For the first time in my life, she looked unsure. Hours after the ceremony, Aldona filed the emergency motions. By evening, Moira's accounts were frozen, her boutique assets seized. Investigators contacted the lender in Vienna. An inquiry opened into the wealthy couple, and Myerk submitted his sworn statement. Moira's empire didn't crumble. It evaporated. The calls started within hours. Bank representatives, tax authorities, police investigators, each one asking Moira to explain transactions she couldn't justify, each one peeling back layers of lies she had carefully constructed over years. Her boutique, which she claimed was thriving, was actually drowning in debt. The investments she bragged about were fabricated. The money she spent on Isolde came from illegal sources. Every thread Aldona pulled unraveled another lie. Moira called me that night, her voice shrill with panic. "What have you done, Katie? What have you done?" I didn't answer. I just hung up. And for the first time in my life, I felt powerful. The wealthy couple who had purchased rights to my unborn child were identified. Their names were Gregor and Ilse Mandel, a prominent family with connections to pharmaceutical companies. They had paid Moira through shell accounts, believing they were engaging in a legal surrogacy arrangement. But there was no surrogacy. There was no legal contract, just Moira's promises and forged documents. When investigators contacted them, they panicked. They claimed ignorance. They claimed they had been deceived, but their payments told a different story. Moira filed a false report claiming I was mentally unstable. She tried to take Leora through social services, painting herself as a concerned grandmother, trying to protect an innocent child from an unfit mother. But Aldona was prepared. We presented Moira's threats, the forged contracts, financial abuse records, recordings from Isolde bank transfers, Myerk's testimony. The report was dismissed instantly. Moira didn't know it yet, but she just destroyed her own credibility in the eyes of the court. The social worker assigned to the case looked at the evidence and then looked at Moira with barely disguised disgust. "Mrs. Alex," she said coldly, "filing false reports is a criminal offense. You've wasted state resources and endangered a child's well-being. We'll be forwarding this matter to the prosecutor." Moira's face went white. She tried to argue, but the social worker cut her off. "This meeting is over." I watched Moira leave the building, her shoulders hunched, her confident stride gone. For the first time, she looked small, defeated. But I knew she wasn't done. Cornered animals fight hardest when they have nothing left to lose. Myerk revealed one more secret. Moira had attempted to sign a second contract, this time to sell Leora once she turned 7. I felt my world spin. My knees nearly buckled. But Myerk grabbed my shoulders. "She didn't succeed, Katie. I blocked it. That's why she turned on me." His loyalty wasn't pure, but it was real. That night, I realized he wasn't just part of the story, he was part of the downfall. Myerk explained that Moira had approached a different couple, offering them a more mature child who could be trained properly. The couple had expressed interest. Documents had been drafted. But Myerk, already guilt-ridden over the first betrayal, had sabotaged the deal. He deleted emails. He lost documents. He told the couple that Moira was unreliable. Slowly, he dismantled her plan without her realizing it was him. When she finally discovered what he'd done, she threatened to destroy him. She said she would claim he had stolen from her, embezzled funds, forged documents himself. That's when Myerk decided to come to me. I couldn't let her do it again, he said, his voice breaking. Once was already too much. The couple who tried to buy my child were forced to testify. Under oath, their lies crumbled. They admitted they had paid Moira. They admitted they knew the arrangement was questionable. They admitted they wanted a child without the complications of official adoption. Moira screamed in court, accusing everyone of betrayal. The judge silenced her. The courtroom wasn't a trial. It was an autopsy of her choices, and she could no longer breathe in the world she created. Watching Moira unravel in court was both satisfying and sad. This woman who had controlled every room she entered, who had manipulated everyone around her with charm and cruelty, was now powerless. Her voice, once commanding, sounded shrill and desperate. Her perfectly styled hair was disheveled. Her hands shook. But I felt no pity, only relief. The judge reviewed the evidence methodically. Every forged signature, every illegal payment, every recorded threat. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold with judgment. Mrs. Alex, you have systematically exploited your daughter for financial gain. You have forged legal documents. You have engaged in what amounts to human trafficking. This court finds your actions reprehensible and criminal. Moira tried to interrupt. The judge's gavel silenced her. Isolde discovered how her lifestyle had been funded. She confronted Moira in front of officers after a court session. I watched from a distance as my sister, who had always been Moira's favorite, finally saw the truth. You sold her baby for me, Isolde sobbed, her voice echoing through the courthouse hallway. For once, Moira had no performance left. She only said, "You were worth it." Isolde collapsed into my arms. That was the first time she ever called me sister without bitterness. My sister's grief was raw and real. She had believed her life was funded by Moira's success, by smart investments and hard work. Discovering that it was built on my exploitation shattered her. I didn't know, she kept repeating, crying into my shoulder. I swear I didn't know. I believe you, I told her, and I did. Isolde was a victim too, just in a different way. Moira had used her as much as she'd used me, just with prettier wrapping. Over the following weeks, Isolde moved out of her Lyon apartment. She gave up the lifestyle Moira had funded. She got a job at a music school, teaching violin to children. She lived simply, quietly, rebuilding her life on honest foundations. We had coffee every Sunday. We talked about our childhoods, comparing notes, realizing how Moira had played us against each other. Slowly, carefully, we built something neither of us had before, a real sisterhood. Investigators from Vienna arrived in our city. Kaspar Brenner, the lender Moira had borrowed from, was under investigation for organized crime. Moira's dealings with him opened a larger case. Moira was arrested on fraud, forgery, child exploitation conspiracy, undeclared income, tampering with legal documents, and racketeering charges. She was handcuffed in her boutique, in front of her customers. Her face collapsed when she saw Myerk standing behind the officers. The betrayal she never expected, the betrayal she earned. The boutique was full that morning. Wealthy women trying on dresses, sipping champagne, admiring themselves in mirrors. When the police entered, everything stopped. The music, the conversations, the illusion. Moira Alex, the lead officer said, you are under arrest. Moira tried to smile, tried to charm, tried to explain. But the officer simply read her rights while snapping handcuffs onto her wrists. Her customers stared in shock. Some whispered. Some filmed on their phones. Moira's empire, built on image and lies, crumbled in front of an audience. As they let her out, she saw Myerk standing near the door. Their eyes met, and in that moment she understood. Her most loyal servant had become her destroyer. The wealthy couple declared bankruptcy after the scandal. Their business contracts dissolved when their involvement in illegal adoption schemes became public. The lender in Vienna, Kaspar Brenner, was investigated by international authorities. The chain of corruption Moira hid behind crumbled, revealing dozens of victims. Isolde had to rebuild her life from zero, but she chose honesty over privilege. She sold her possessions, paid back what she could, and started fresh. And Meyerk, he testified fully, providing every detail he'd hidden for years. Then he disappeared from Moira's life forever. He moved to a small town, changed his name, started a quiet bookkeeping business helping small charities. Every thread unraveled. Every accomplice faced consequences. Justice moved slowly, but it moved completely. The ripple effects were enormous. Other women came forward, claiming Moira had approached them with similar schemes. A woman in Budapest, another in Prague, 3 more in Germany. Moira had been running this operation for years, targeting vulnerable women, offering them money in exchange for their future children. Most had refused, but a few hadn't known what they were signing. Their cases were reopened, their stories told. The full scope of Moira's crimes became clear. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had built an entire system of exploitation. 1 year later, my life looked nothing like it had before. Leora grew taller, smarter, happier. She knew nothing of the darkness that had surrounded her birth. I intended to keep it that way until she was old enough to understand. My small sewing business tripled in size. I hired 3 seamstresses. We created beautiful dresses for women who appreciated craftsmanship. I bought a little house with a garden where Leora could play safely. I slept without fear. I laughed without guilt. I made decisions without asking permission. Isolde visited often. We rebuilt something real. She taught Leora violin. I taught her how to sew. We cooked dinners together, took walks in the park, and celebrated small victories. And Meyerk, he worked for me now, not as an assistant, but as someone finally free. He managed my business accounts with precision and gratitude. He never mentioned Moira. Neither did I. Moira remained in prison. Her sentence was 12 years. Her name became a cautionary tale in legal circles, a case study in narcissistic exploitation. And the world finally felt mine. The house I bought had a porch where Leora and I sat every evening, watching the sunset. She'd tell me about her day at school, her friends, her dreams, and I'd listen with full attention, something my mother never gave me. "Mama," she asked one evening, "why don't we see Grandma anymore?" I had prepared for this question, because Grandma made choices that hurt people, and sometimes, when people hurt us, we need to love ourselves enough to stay away. She thought about this, then nodded. "Okay. Children understand more than we think." I tell this story not to shame my past, but to free someone else from theirs. If you grew up small, controlled, manipulated, trained to accept less, hear me. You are allowed to rise. You are allowed to break the pattern. You are allowed to protect the child you once were. I was naive, unprepared, unaware of the weapons aimed at my life, but I still won not with chaos or violence, but with truth, patience, and the law. And you can too. Wherever you are, whoever hurt you, whatever they took, you can reclaim your life. Piece by piece, quietly, powerfully, completely. People often ask me if I regret confronting Moira. If I wish I'd just walked away quietly, taken Leora, and disappeared. The answer is no, because walking away would have left her free to hurt someone else, and I couldn't live with that. Sometimes justice requires us to be uncomfortable, to face people who terrify us, to speak truths that make our voices shake, but that discomfort is temporary. The freedom that follows is permanent. If you're reading this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you have a mother, father, partner, or friend who treats you like property, please know, you deserve better. You deserve safety. You deserve a life where your value isn't negotiable. And there are people who will help you, lawyers like Aldona, allies like Meyerk, systems that, despite their flaws, can protect you when you're brave enough to ask. Now tell me, What part of your story are you ready to rewrite? Because here's what I learned. Narcissists win when we stay silent. They lose when we speak. They thrive in darkness. They wither in sunlight. Moira controlled me for 28 years. She almost controlled Leora's entire life. But she lost. Not because I was stronger, not because I was smarter, but because I decided one night, sitting in my kitchen with a folder of evidence, that enough was enough. You can decide that too. Today, right now, this moment. You don't need a dramatic confrontation. You don't need a courtroom. You just need one decision. I will not accept this anymore. That decision might look like saying no without explaining why, blocking a phone number, walking out of a room when someone disrespects you, keeping your child away from toxic grandparents, choosing your peace over their comfort. Small acts of rebellion become revolutions. I didn't expose my mother for revenge. I exposed her for protection, for Leora, for myself, for every woman Moira would have hurt if I'd stayed silent. So write it well, write it honestly, write it full of the things you deserve: safety, respect, joy, autonomy, peace. Write yourself into a story where you're not the victim or the villain, just the hero who refused to stay down. I'm rooting for you. From one survivor to another.